Um, now, interestingly, nobody thought we don't need one. So there's a general thinking we do need one. Now, what about this other second one, Kate? As a professional, I have a career path mapped out, and I know all the competencies I need to move from one level to a higher level.
Okay, now looking at this, in terms of career mapping, what are we looking at best on career mapping? Because for me, I look at, if you say, yes, I have a career, I have my career mapped out, and I know all the competencies. If you know all the competencies, which brings me back to question number one, then in a way it's being used, but it's not been communicated. Because you can see it's about 58%, and on the above question, it was 33% who knew about competencies. So what I'm picking is probably maybe people know, or they're using, or they're actually, competencies are in place, and the only problem is probably it hasn't been competencies. Probably you're just told that these are things you need to have for you to move to the next level. However, again, for me, a huge number, which is 38%, who have said that their career is not mapped. If you're an HR professional, um, you are actually the person who's the driver of talent management strategy within the organization. Now, when and for you to drive this talent management strategy, you really need to be able to map it with the competencies that exist, in terms of to give the organization a competitive advantage, in the sense that the organization knows what it needs to move to the next level, and you as the HR person, you need to also know what competencies these people need to move the organization to that desirable result that they need. Now, if the HR also is not aware of their career path and movement, it also now shows how probably in terms of the consideration for let me say, the HR space is not being taken seriously, if wherever the 38% lie. Because it means if they've not, or your position hasn't been actually considered in that level, then it becomes even very difficult for you to move the talent management strategy anywhere to map the HR strategy and the organization strategy.
Thank you very much, Kate. I saw we had a number of countries, participants from various countries. A question to the participants: does HR in your country have a competency framework? Right? Yes, and for no. For Kenya, I know the one does not exist so far. No? If you can share, I saw someone from Nigeria, from Uganda. Your country has a competency framework for HR professionals. A yes or no? Okay, Felicity, I guess that's either Botswana or South Africa. I know South Africa has a competency framework. Okay, so I think as we move on, Kate,
Yes.
my mapped out all the competencies required for each role in the organization. Now, only 33%, similar to the 33% we got first, where companies have competency frameworks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the concern for me would be the 50% that is no,
Mm-hmm.
and the 21% that believe they have job descriptions. Why do they even need competencies?
Mm-hmm.
No? Yes.
Okay.
What's your thinking there?
Now, let me start with the 21%. I actually almost understand where they come from, or where that notion or the idea comes in from. Now, we usually look at our job description or our JDs. When we look at it, it lists what we call, it will list the job specification and the job description itself. But then on the job specification, it will list not fully, but let me say, in most right, what we write is what is called competencies, but if you look at it critically, sometimes in most of them, it's not, unless you've been using competencies within the organization. Now, remember, competencies are in about, they're in three different categories. One will be the core competencies, two will be the cross-functional competencies, and three will be the technical competencies, which will now be job specific. Now, for most guys who, you'll find most people look at, when they have a job description, they already assume we have sorted the competency aspect, so we really don't need to map out the competencies for the whole organization. But however, that is actually, let's say you're doing part of the job, you're not doing it fully, you're only mapping one aspect of the competencies. You're not mapping the whole aspect to come up now with actually a competency framework, which covers the three: the core competencies, the cross-functional competencies, and now the job specific, which is the functional competencies. So you'll find the job description only caters for one level of that. Now, with that, taking now that, that would be, usually you'll find that happens with people who, rather, that comes up with people who look at the job description as everything, it sorts out everything. But then now that is where it happens that if you combine those who said no, that the organization has not mapped, and the JD, it's actually based on now the whole thing that everybody takes the JD will do everything for us. We'll have the JD, we'll have our KPIs, we'll have everything. But what people are forgetting is that when you have the competency framework in place, it's a way of managing all the HR, should I call it, yes, the HR systems, where we have the recruitment system, how you're doing your recruitment, from how you're recruiting, making it very, very objective and not subjective. You'll be using some of these competence to vet these people. Now, when you come to when you move to performance appraisal, you'll be using, again, you'll be able to map these competencies into that system. Now, again, when you move to the next, where would be, now you'll be handling training and development within the organization, you're also able to train people using competencies, making sure that first, there are those that you're training who are within, who have what we call performance gap, which is the gap within whatever role that they're doing, or those who have developmental gaps such that they have moved to the next level, but they need, or you're moving them to the next level, and you need to develop them to have certain competencies for them to be able to perform well within their role. So you'll find that when you don't look at and consider the competencies, you're missing out on the actual developing of your people holistically, in terms of from end to end of the HR aspect. So that is what will be missing. For the 33% who have mapped, and I'm sure some of them within the webinar now will confirm that they're actually able to use these competencies, even apart from the three that I've said. Also for succession planning, you're able now to know whom to develop for what, be very exact and precise on who needs what development and for what purpose and moving to what role. So it plays a very, very big role in so many things. And if you're not using it, you're really missing out on really, let me say, being the best agent, HR agent for your organization. It's a very good tool to have around, and really creating the framework makes really everybody speak the same language within the organization.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah? So now I think maybe we should move back a little bit and actually just talk over a little bit about what is actually a competency and what is a framework. What is a competency framework?
Okay. Now, before, let's start with what's a competence? Competence is what we call means. It's a means or a skill or the standard of performance that is reached for, let's say, any particular role. But then when somebody exhibits these behaviors of showing some competence, now we refer to that as a competency. Now, here we are looking at mainly today, like we are going to focus on individual competency, whereby now we'll be very specific in terms of a set of behaviors or performance indicators that will be associated with exceptional performance in an organizational role that anybody is playing, whatever role it is. Now, each competency will be reflecting certain things like knowledge, skills, abilities, and probably other factors that we might want to consider that influence or even, you know, multiply traits and motivations that exist, that are there. And ultimately, what you will be getting or arriving at is a skillful behavior that will be exhibited by a person within the organization. Now, as you're looking at that, that is what now in terms of when we're looking at competencies, what they are. And when you're looking at that, we have, there are 5 types of competency characteristics that we'll be looking at. We have what we call motives. These are the things a person consistently thinks, or what they want, or that which causes them, you know, to move to action. That thing that drives somebody within, that directs them, that moves them to behave in a certain way, to think in a certain way, to, you know, chase some goals in a very particular or in a certain way. Now, the next competency, what we have is we have what is called traits. Now, for traits, these are just what you call the physical characteristics and anything that is consistent with the response to that, either that situation. Let's say if you're talking about active listening, if it's active listening, are you listening? Are you nodding? You know, all those traits that come in, that are you maintaining eye contact and all those things. And then we have what you call is self-concept. Self-concept is the person's attitude, values, and self-image that they have of themselves. Remember, what do we always say? Hire for attitude. Why do we hire for attitude? Because these people, you're hiring people who have the right attitude, the attitude to work, their value system. When you're asking them those questions, you're gauging their value system, and their value system, you're looking at value system that is also consistent. So that is the aspect. And then the other things, you train for skills and knowledge. Now, the other competency characteristic that you would be looking at, or you have to consider, would be knowledge, the information that the person has in a specific area. Let's say, let's pick, for example, like Kate Wekesa. Kate Wekesa has knowledge in HR, knowledge in learning and development, as well as knowledge in operations. Those are my key knowledge areas. And those are key areas that I work. Now, in terms of skill, you'll find that the next would be now the skill that you're looking at. The skill would be the ability to perform certain physical and mental tasks. Now, within even that, even within the HR, within the learning and development, within the operations for Kate Wekesa, you will be looking at what skills does she have, you know, to be able to say that she's actually competent enough to perform what she needs to do. Now, that was what we were talking about in terms of competency. So let's get to competency framework. A competency framework now is what we call, it's basically a model that broadly describes performance excellence, which is within the organization. And usually you'll find that there are a number of competencies which are applied across, like I mentioned earlier. We'll have the three different tiers or categories of competence within it. And then you'll find within the competency framework that each competency is actually defined in generic terms, when it's being defined, it's actually explaining the excellence working behavior that is sought for within it. And then this framework will, it actually shows which, or rather it communicates the behaviors that the organization is looking for, the behaviors that the organization values, the behavior that the organization recognizes, and also the behaviors that the organization rewards in respect to specific roles that exist. Now, you'll discover that as I've said, that in terms of competencies or within the framework, you'll find that you have the core values. These core values will be ethical standards that are based on probably the industry or what the organization values as its values, and the action that it wants its people to to exhibit. And then you'll find that we have now the core competencies. Now, you'll find that with these core competencies, what they basically do is they provide, it's a foundation for the whole framework in terms of what every staff should have. The other one was the core values. Now, these are core competencies. And then now we break it down. Now we come down to, let's say Catherine is the HR manager for XYZ organization. So there will be functional competencies based on, in terms of the HR function. You'll have those ones in IT, you'll have those ones in finance and all that. So within a competency framework, you will find that you have now, apart from these in terms of the competencies in terms of core values, core competencies, and the functional competencies, and them being defined. And then you'll find that also what will be defined will be the performance standards that are sought for, what the expectation is, what it looks like. So it's just not a listing of competencies here and there, and then it leaves you high and dry. What next? What do you do with that? It gives you the performance measurement in terms of what it values and what you'll actually notice. If you have a competency framework within your organization, one thing you'll notice that the different competencies, like the group of competencies, they're awarded different weights. Some have higher weights than others. Those with the higher weights are just the same way it is in performance management. Those with the higher weights are what the organization considers mostly. So it's the same concept, because we are piecing. If you're to really use the competency framework holistically, remember, through the employee journey from onboarding to offboarding, you have used the competency framework, right? So now that means that for everything and from coming in until they leave, you're able to measure and move things and assess things along the way. So you'll find that a competency framework actually captures the talent management of the organization. It shows the standards, it will show the behavior that is required. It will show, if you're to move, what is expected of you. It will show the desirable level of expected level of employees, in terms of this being the, what should I call it, them very well. But then just slightly the difference above that and those who are highly performers. So there is a level that the organization will say, this is our desirable level of performance that we are looking for, and that at least everybody must have these as the basic. But then there's an exemplar where these are the highest performers, where we are achieving and developing people for them to move to that level. So back to you, Martin. I know I have spoken a lot about competency framework, but yes, I hope everybody understands how important it is, because if you look at the competency framework, and you look at your strategic implementation matrix, you can actually start drawing, and your balance scorecard, you can start drawing lines and seeing how things connect, even without anybody telling you. And everybody, now when you have a competency framework, everybody is able to speak the same language. You're being measured on a criteria that is standard across the board. Note that when you're coming in, we don't know how we are measuring, we are looking at you, or when you're coming to performance management, we have a totally different system. When we get to succession planning, we're using a totally different system. With competency framework, what it does, it actually integrates the whole of HR systems within, and you get a holistic system that helps you move. In terms of when you're training your people, how you're training them, you're very clear and succinct and precise that I am training for this. Training is being designed for that. Yes. Yes.
Before we get into the learning, which is a very interesting part,
Yes.
I just wanted to just have a small discussion where we are at to get to the competency framework. So any organization that creates a strategy, now and this is for the every strategy requires a specific set of competencies. So, and that's why most organizations, when they do their, as you mentioned, or about strategy and balance scorecard, when they do their strategy, when they translate and cascade their strategy, they're able to see what skills, what attitudes, what they need to achieve the new strategy they have. So if your organization comes up with a new strategy and expects it's going to achieve it with the same skills, with the same competence, with the same attitude, with the same culture, well, I'd say, and maybe you'd agree with me, Kate, that that is lying to themselves. Every new strategy would come with new competencies that are required so as to achieve it. And that's why we come up with the competency framework. Now, the interesting part is now where we're getting into, Kate, learning and development. So what actually is competency-based learning? Yeah?
Yes. Now, competency-based learning, this is where now, like, first, let me actually reiterate what you have just said. Yes, it is. If an organization changes, like now, because of COVID, and we've gone back and probably looked at our strategy and re-strategized again, and we already had competency framework in place. As Martin has said, it is ideal that you go back again and look at your competency framework. Will that competency framework help you achieve what now, because you have redone your strategy, will it help you achieve what you have redone? If you're still going on with the same strategy, the same competencies, yes, like Martin has said, you're lying to yourself. You'll encounter a lot of hurdles along the way. Now, coming to competency-based training or learning. Now, competence-based training, let me start with that. It's basically when you're looking at when you're coming up or designing your training, you do not just design trainings or training people or training your employees because probably that you have noticed. Remember, in the traditional method of looking at or designing training, the instructional system design, you would look at and go through assess that this is a problem, know whether train, yes, you've identified you need that. You have to be very critical in terms of you look at and pinpoint what competency actually is being affected and what competency actually needs and is very areas that you concentrate your training on. in terms of developing your. So it becomes very, and also, remember, even if you the 2010 rule for developing your people, 70% of that you'll be doing, and the 10% now in terms of the competencies that are there within every role or whatever that you're, if it's functional or just individual, in terms of what you're looking at, again, you're basically looking at competencies such that you are developing, you are training your people based on competencies to develop those competencies for them to be able to help the organization achieve its desired result. So you're more fixed and pinpointing at competencies as opposed to just, let's just train because I want to train for this, I want to train for that. No, you're very, very categorical in terms of you're looking at the competencies. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, a quick question to the audience. Would like to welcome questions on chat, but I have a question for you. When you do your trainings or learning, okay, maybe the first question, does your organization have an internal learning team? That you have a team that is in charge of learning in the organization? A wife, yes, and for no. Share with us on chat. Okay, let's all share so that we're learning from each other. Okay, as we talk learning, you've been around the market for a while. Where are we going wrong?
Yes. Now, Martin. Mostly what happens is that you will find what happens is there's probably something went wrong or things are not going the way they are expected to go. A manager will say, no, I think I need my team trained. I think I need my salespeople trained. And you get a trainer, you tell them, can you come and train them on customer service? Can you train them on telesales? Can you train them on this, on that? However, what you're actually supposed to do is make it look at the individual competencies within that person. You need to do an assessment, whether, you see now, earlier I had talked about making sure that it's integrated, it's linked from the performance appraisals, the feedback that comes from there, or you can actually do an assessment and see that these are the competencies that are lacking, or you can even use the manager to tell you, but the manager has to actually be very objective that tell you, yes, they will tell you that these competencies are very key for my department. What happens, you'll find it's just a blanket. We sit and decide that I think the salespeople need to be trained on this, meaning the training is just, you're not being very deliberate on improving which competencies for which individual. We offer blanket for everybody. And that's where now you find at the end, you realize at times you'll hear people, even managers within the organization talking and saying, this training does not add value at all. My people were trained, the results didn't shift at all. There was no change in anything. Reason being, probably we offered across the board a training that probably wasn't intended for them. Now, if you're looking at, let's say you're looking at still sticking with the sales team, you're still looking at the sales team. Now, if you are able to go through and identify which competencies that my sales team need to deliver whatever we need to deliver at the end of the day, how many have this kind of competence, how many do not have this kind of competence, then you need, now you come up and design trainings that are actually ideal and actually would go through the Kirkpatrick level model, and you're able to now come up with proper training that addresses the competencies. And then when you're doing the level 4, we are able to now look at the results that have come out. And again, when you're going through when you're going through the assessment, remember competencies covers knowledge, skill, attitude, and motives, which might also be there. And motives, motives, most of them, a little bit of it is what is above it. It goes through the iceberg model. For motives, you'll only see a little bit of it. Most of it is usually under, but you can be able to pick in terms of how people see themselves, how people, what drives them and all that. You'll see the results in a way, and you can be able to pick. Now, if you're able to do or analyze in knowledge, skill, ability, and all those, you're able now to come up with competencies, cluster in terms of competencies, and come up and know that these competencies are required for this for this department, or for this individual. And now, even if it is the let's say the whole department, but what you'll do is now you start breaking it down. Not everybody needs this training, because remember again, if you call me for a training that I've always come and I'm proficient in it, there is no learnership that is happening at the end of the day. What I'm just doing is I'm there to sit, let's get done with this training. And the man hours that employee is losing is quite a lot by them just being there. And also, even in terms of when you convert that into money. So you'd rather train the exact by you being able to assess and now be very, very direct and know who needs what training. So that's where we lack. We rush into training, but we don't do the assessment that is needed beforehand.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kate. Yeah. So
Yes.
there's a question here from Sabrina. Does skill governance lead to competency framework?
It's only, should I say, a subset. Remember, for competency, competency covers skill within, skill is within what we call competency. So it covers a subset of it, because you need to look at the skill and also the knowledge that is required. So yes, in a way, it will give you, or it will lead towards, it will indicate towards, but it will not give you the holistic picture. So even if you do a skill gap, you still need to look deeper and now look at the knowledge, look at the attitude, look at the motives. So you need to grow it up.
Actually, there was a discussion I think we were having somewhere. For you to be able to develop a competency-based, a competency framework, yes, you need to do the skills gap. Then you need to look if it is a position like chief learning officer. So you look at what are the actual skills required for a chief learning officer
Yes.
in a learning institution. And
Yes.
then I think between the skills gap and what you've come as what is required, that's where you have your actual learning path for someone who wants to end up as a chief learning officer.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Actually, yes, that is true.
Thank you very much. So thank you. Now we'd like to welcome some questions from the audience. We have about 14 minutes before we go to the next. We move on. There's a question from Christina. If you carry out a skills analysis assessment and you find that different staff have got different skills gaps, how do you merge the training to be able to meet their unique needs? Kidao, everyone. Okay.
Christina, and be sure that people will have different needs across the organization. Now, when you're coming up, let's say you're coming up with training in terms of, you're coming up with the training needs in terms of, now you're using the CBT, competency-based training. So what happens is, as you're actually coming up, you will discover that people have, yes, like you said, people have different needs. So what you'll have to do is you look at, remember I had mentioned that at the broadly, when you're coming up with a framework, it's divided broadly into, there's a big groups of competencies, and within it, it's broken down. So you'll find probably whatever Kate, where there's a gap in Kate, also Martin has another gap, but within the same broad competency. So when you're designing or coming up with trainings, you can do a training. Let's say both of us have different gaps within communication. So, but we all have different gaps. Even let's say, let me add some more. Even Rachel has a gap. So what happens as you're designing, you look at, say with communication, you can have, let's say, Kate has active listening, has a gap there. In terms of communicativeness, probably Martin has something there. And Rachel has also a gap in informal communication. So what happens when you're designing this training? When you come up with a communication skills training, you are actually, on the learning objectives, you're focusing on these, the active listening, the communicativeness aspect, and the informal communication as areas that, at the end of the day, this is what will be achieved. So when you're training, within the same training, we are all seated, Martin, Kate, and Rachel, but all our needs are addressed within, such that you find that, and you see those needs as you're coming up with the needs, what you'll be looking at mainly will be, in terms of who's or what does the productive performer within the organization look like? What characteristics do they have? Now, from that, you design training that will actually look at this end. You compare again for those who have, we call it acceptable performance. And then now you design training that even if Kate sat in it, Martin sat in it, Rachel sat in it, all their developmental needs will be addressed within that training. I hope I've been able to.
Yes, you've articulated that very well. Something from Jackson Mushiri, and I'm totally in agreement. It is
Yes.
the learning farms that fail. Why do they fail? Sometimes we have learning farms that are too quick to get the business and deliver the training, but not even knowing what the training is fixing. You have an idea from the HR department, this is the training needs, but you've not validated it. So Moshiri, totally agree with you. Learning farms needs to change the process of how they do learning, right? Now, just a quick question with something I'm picking up. A quick question to the audience. Does your organization have a learning management system, an LMS? Yes or no? Yes or no? Why? Yes, and for no. Does your organization have a learning management system? Kindly share on chat. Kindly share on chat. Your organization has a LMS? Yeah. Okay, no. More takers, please. Let's just get okay. Okay. For now, Kate, I'm assuming, I'm imagining from what I'm seeing, hearing on chat, that it is assumed that learning can only happen in a location for 2 to 3, 4 days. Now, and at this point, I think I'd like to introduce micro learning, right?
Yes.
Micro learning, where organizations can create short 5, 10 minutes learning session, learning videos or learning programs which address specific competencies. Would that be proper thinking?
Sorry, just Come again, sorry.
Okay, sorry. What I was going on let me, uh, sorry about that.
It's all
What I
right.
was saying was that we as learning is viewed as an event, that it can
Yes.
only happen in a hotel, in a
Mm-hmm.
boardroom, over 2 days, over three
Mm-hmm.
days, and we neglect the other forms of
Mm-hmm.
learning. Uh, yes, would I be right in saying that that's a general, what general way it is?
Yes. And majorly, again, you will realize that, yes, most organizations, leave alone even organizations, even, let me put it, there's even the management that are there within organizations have always looked at training as, you know, not thinking it through in terms of linking it from business strategy, linking it to business results, such that whatever we are training, whatever the learning that needs to occur has to give results, such that now you'll find if something happens or if a manager wants their people trained, they'll say, I don't have 3 days, but can we I'll look for some time when we can have time to train. But they're forgetting that in terms of learning doesn't really necessarily have to be held in a hotel. Learning can be, you can come up with even 30 minutes. As you've said, video. You can come up with 1 hour session for your people. Like going back to was yes, to Christina's question, also linking it with that. What you can do is I mean, you can create 1 hour sessions. You train people on a particular competence within the broader competence. And once you start looking at training that way, that it does not mean that we need to take people out, that we need to do this. You can create trainings, you can create short trainings, you can create small videos that actually capture what you need your people to be trained on and have them trained. And in fact, there are different formats. It doesn't have to be that we take it up, but I'll speak for uh, in Uganda and in Kenya, you'll find that people like the training out of their offices because they find it's a time to now relax, to get out, relax, and feel free. That would be some. Uh, some you'll find in government, what they chase is the per diem. So they would prefer to. It doesn't matter. They will. It's not about for. It's not about them. About leadership for that training. It's where are we going? How far is it? What am I getting as a per diem? But people are forgetting that you also need to develop. And that's why you find that competency-based training has it's a two-prong approach to it. One is the organization. In terms of the organization, it's forcing the organization to be very precise and very critical in terms of coming up, if you have an internal trainer, coming up with very specific training. However, also for the individual, it forces you to now, because you start seeing your career path, you start mapping and looking at that, it's forcing you to be what we call a competence-based learner. You are pushing yourself to get the skills to be competent in a certain level, and for you to move to the next level, you keep struggling and stretching yourself and allowing yourself to be stretched. And even you'll find you, as the employee yourself, you're the one pushing your boss that can they give you something more because you want to gain the next level of competence. So you'll find that it brings a two-pronged approach. But yes, I know most of people have always focused on it's an event, let's go out. Next week I won't be in the office. I'll be out of town. I'll be going for a training. It will be time for me to relax. But they're forgetting about the individual responsibility within the value chain of it.
Thank you, Kate. There's a philosophical question here. Uh,
Yes.
is there any difference between learning and training?
Oh, yes, a very, very big one. A very, very big one. Let me give this example. If I came to your organization and I was given learning objectives, I came up with a training, and then I came up, stood there, trained, and left. That's training, because I am not focusing on what the learner will get at the end of the day. I'm not focusing on the participant. I'm not very precise at looking at the participant. That is training. Let's look at a very good example. What you get in school, when you go to school, you're trained. But when you come to learning, I'm very, very specific. Very, very specific. I am looking at your individual need. I am very, very specific in terms of where are you, what do you know, and what do you need to know to move to the next level. So that's the difference between the two. One is I can come, talk, and go. If for learning, for learning and training organizations, we'll come, train, get our money, and go. We really don't care. But if we are very specific as as training organizations or learning organizations, what we'll do is, even before we come and train you, we will come, find out what exactly, and actually try and pinpoint. Remember that not every problem needs to be sorted out by training. Others can be sorted out in a different way. If it's an issue in terms of issue to do with knowledge, skills, and attitude, those are trainable. Those are things you train. Others could be a system problem. So unless I am training on the system, if I come and offer you training on something closer to it, but I'm not actually addressing what is causing the performance gap and identifying what the performance gap is, then I'm just doing training. I'm not making sure that you're learning, because I should actually, if I'm going to make you learn, I should actually make you actually touch on your developmental need, your performance gap that you have, and address it. And at the end of the training, you should be able to get a certain level of competence within what you do.
So I'm getting something from what you're saying.
Yes.
Since we have HR professionals here who are involved in learning in the organization, from what I'm picking, you're saying they need to ensure that whoever they're bringing on board for the learning is actually a learning farm and not a training farm. Because a training farm just is just looking to deliver. Basically, they should hire people who will do proper needs assessment based on what they have, design specific trainings that addresses the needs of that organization and the team in that organization, and they're also able to measure results. So the
Yes.
full thing of learning.
Yes, yes. That's what I'm saying in a nutshell. Otherwise, you'll get a training form.
Thank you. Okay, we'd like to welcome one or two questions before we close. Our 1 hour is over. Next week, we are having very interesting sessions. We are having sessions on leading in heels and something around HR technology. We'd like to welcome for any questions. We already shared yesterday's recording plus recordings from 15th of April. If you have not received in your inbox, check also on your spam mail, but we have sent as we promised to send. So as we end up this, as we near to close this session, I'd like to ask if there's any question on chat, any question from the audience, kindly type it out on chat. And then I would also like to request if you could rate this session on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. Kindly give us a rating. And then I'd also like to thank the nearly 70 HR professionals from right across the continent who've joined us for this 1 hour. And we appreciate. I always say there are 1,000,001 things someone could be doing this 1 hour, but they choose to spend it with High Performance Africa. Thank you for the great ratings. Kate, as
Yes.
we close this session,
Yes.
in terms of competency-based learning,
Yes.
what would your last word be?
My last word would be, if you are in the HR space, you're the HR manager, when you are deciding that you need your team to be trained, it is very, very key that you look at, consider the competence actually that the people you need them trained are going to gain after the training. What will be seen on the results, what you expect the results to be, as opposed to just having your team trained on this skill and you leave it at that. It is very, very important. And considering now that we are embracing technology so much, meaning that a lot of training is also moving to like what we're having right now, e-learning, because you're going to have e-learning taking a stronger component of our training going forward. Base that training in terms of competence that are within the organization. If there is no competency framework within the organization, take your time. By the way, coming up with the competency framework is not an easy thing, and it's not something you can do like today and tomorrow. It will take a lot of your time. So be patient and take time and come up with the framework. With that framework, in terms of even developing your people, I can guarantee you that in terms of coming up with good training for your people, that training that addresses their needs, you will be speaking to their needs. And it will be actually, even when you now go through the Kirkpatrick level, it's not a guarantee that 100% there'll be change, but you're at least able to see, to address those needs, and you will be expecting at least something about 70 to 80% change in terms of the results, which would be attributed to training. So uh, embrace competence-based training. That would be my parting shot today. It's the way to go, and it's really, really important that you really think about it. If your organization does not have, if it has, relook at your competencies right now, even the training forward from now. Look at the competencies that are there. If the strategy has been changed, also relook at the competencies, and also make sure that if anybody comes to train, or even when you're training inside, make sure you peg it as well as to competencies. That would be my parting shot.
Thank you very much, Kate. We appreciate your time. Just to the audience, we'd like to inform you that we actually do have some sessions or trainings that you can take, or you can have your team take, that they would be able to create learning for your organization. And these are NITA approved. We just got our approval for these sessions this week. So these are sessions around instruction system design, e-learning instruction design, virtual train the trainer, creating competency-based frameworks, and then also self-based learning that addresses the competency needs for your organizations. Thank you very much. We'd like to thank you very much. Again, if you'd like to, I personally will be training this session, these 5 trainings. For any more information, you can reach out right to me, Martin, at High Performance Africa, or to the email on the screen, Lucy at High Performance Africa, or you can reach us on the telephone number listed 0741-852-054. We'd like to thank you very much, and we apologize for eating into your time. We are past by 7 minutes. We'd like to thank everyone. See you next week when we handle HR technology and then also leading in heels. We want to see more ladies in the C-suite positions, and we want to invite some 3 CEOs from across the continent who will share with us a few things. Thank you very much. We'd like to welcome to thank you very much and welcome next week. Thank you and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, guys, and see you next week.